My name is Laura Bennett, and until yesterday, I believed loyalty still mattered in business. We're going lean, Ethan Monroe announced, not even bothering to sit down. We don't keep dead weight around here. You're done. I stared at the 28-year-old man who had been CEO for exactly 6 hours and 43 minutes. Behind him, a glossy Wharton School of Business diploma hung crookedly on the wall, the store sticker still clinging to the corner of the frame. I understand, I replied, my voice steady despite the shock racing through me. 9 years at Monroe Industrial Group, erased in less than 10 seconds. May I ask why? Ethan's mouth twisted into what he probably thought was a confident smile. My father needed someone to babysit contracts and paperwork. I don't. This company needs to move forward, not be held back by old ways. I nodded slowly, my fingers tightening around the notepad in my hands. Only minutes earlier, I had been reviewing supplier contracts, documents I had personally rewritten to save the company millions. Somewhere in those files was my own employment agreement, carefully negotiated years ago. I'll need everything in writing, I said, standing up from the visitor's chair. This office had belonged to Robert Monroe until his retirement just last week. HR will handle it, Ethan said, already turning back to his computer. Security will escort you out. Standard procedure. Of course. Thank you for the opportunity, I replied calmly. Confusion flickered across his face. He hadn't expected grace. He hadn't expected composure. As the security guard watched me place my personal belongings into a cardboard box, my phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from coworkers. Shocked. Angry. Confused. I ignored them all. In the bottom drawer of my desk lay what I came for. My contract. Almost done, I told the guard, sliding the folder into my bag. Everyone at Monroe Industrial knew me as the fixer, the one called when deals went bad, when regulators circled, when clients threatened to walk. Yet here I was, being escorted out like a liability. I walked straight past my stunt team, into the elevator, and out into the cool Denver morning. Only once inside my car did I allow myself to breathe. I opened the folder and flipped to a page I knew by heart. Section 7. 4. Termination without cause. A small smile formed. Ethan Monroe had just made the most expensive mistake of his life. 9 years earlier, I was 26, fresh out of law school, and desperate to prove myself. I specialized in contract law and applied to every major company in the city. Robert Monroe had interviewed me himself. Most lawyers just rubber stamp whatever they're given, he had said. I need someone who tells me when I'm about to ruin my own company. I was hired the next day. Over the years, I became more than legal counsel. I negotiated crisis contracts, closed impossible deals, and protected Monroe Industrial from lawsuits that would have destroyed it. When competitors tried to poach me 3 years ago, Robert countered with loyalty, and a contract that reflected my value. Your family now, Laura, he told me. I believed him. And I gave everything I had. Until his son decided I was dead weight. As I drove away, one thought echoed in my mind, this wasn't the end. It was the opening move. By the time I reached home, the shock had worn off, and something sharper had taken its place. Clarity. I kicked off my heels, set my bag on the kitchen counter, and spread the contract pages out like a crime scene. Outside, the city hummed as if nothing had changed. Inside, my entire professional life had just detonated. Section 7. 4 wasn't vague. It wasn't negotiable. It was ironclad. If Monroe Industrial terminated me without cause, the company owed me 3 years of full salary, immediate vesting of my performance equity, a non-compete waiver, and, this was the real kicker, control of all active negotiations I had personally secured, including the Horizon Logistics merger. A deal worth $8 million in fresh capital. My phone rang. Robert Monroe. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. Laura, please call me. I had no idea Ethan was going to do this. I sighed and poured myself a glass of water, then finally pressed call. Laura, Robert said the second I answered, his voice strained. I just found out. This is unacceptable. I was terminated, I replied evenly. Without cause. In writing. With witnesses. Silence followed. Ethan is impulsive, Robert said carefully. He's still learning. Then he just learned something very expensive, I said. I can fix this, he insisted. Come back tomorrow. We'll talk. I'll have him apologize. That won't be necessary, I replied. HR already finalized the paperwork. Robert inhaled sharply. Laura, don't do this. Do what? I asked. Enforce a contract your legal team drafted and signed. More silence. I trusted you, he finally said. And I honored that trust for 9 years, I replied. Your son broke it in 9 minutes. When the call ended, my phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. From HR at Monroe Industrial. Subject, final termination documents. They really had no idea what they'd done. I forwarded the email to my personal attorney, Megan Clark, with one line, trigger Section 7. 4. Immediately. Her response came less than 5 minutes later. Already reviewing. Holy hell, Laura. I smiled for the first time that day. The next morning, my inbox exploded. Executives panicking. Managers asking for guidance. Suppliers checking in. Clients requesting reassurance. And one email marked urgent from Ethan himself. Laura, there seems to be some confusion. My father says you believe you're entitled to. I didn't read the rest. Instead, I joined a video call with Horizon Logistics. Before we continue, their CFO said carefully, we need confirmation you're still authorized to negotiate on Monroe Industrial's behalf. I'm not, I replied calmly. As of yesterday, I'm an independent party under contractual assignment. Their eyes widened. You fired her, one of them muttered off camera. I was terminated, I corrected. Without cause. There was a long pause. Well, the CFO said slowly, in that case, we'd prefer to continue discussions directly with you. Exactly as I'd planned. By noon, Monroe Industrial's legal department was in full meltdown. The Horizon deal was frozen. Vendors were hesitating. Word had spread faster than Ethan could contain it. At 1:17 p.m., Ethan showed up at my door. No suit. No confidence. Just panic. You blindsided us, he snapped the moment I opened the door. No, I said calmly. You fired me. You're sabotaging the company. I stepped aside and let him see the papers laid out on my table. I'm enforcing the contract you didn't bother to read. His face drained of color. We can reverse this, he said quickly. Come back. Same position. Higher pay. I met his eyes. You already showed me what you think I'm worth. I closed the door. Behind it, I could hear him breathing hard. For the first time since yesterday, Ethan Monroe understood, this wasn't a negotiation. This was consequence. By the third day, Monroe Industrial was bleeding quietly, but badly. Their stock hadn't crashed. Not yet. But insiders knew what was coming. Meetings were being rescheduled. Emails rewritten. Every decision delayed with the same unspoken question: what happens if Laura doesn't back down? I watched it all from the outside, coffee in hand, sitting at my dining table that had turned into a command center. My phone didn't stop buzzing, but I wasn't answering anyone from Monroe anymore. Only Horizon. And Megan. "This is spiraling fast," Megan said during our morning call. "The legal team is trying to argue that Section 7 for only applies if you're terminated for reasons unrelated to performance." I smiled. And Ethan accused you of being disruptive in the termination memo." I laughed. "After firing me mid-sentence." Megan chuckled. "Exactly. Which is why that argument won't survive 10 minutes in arbitration." "Good," I said. "Because I'm done playing defense." By noon, Horizon Logistics sent over a revised term sheet. Same valuation. Same capital injection. But this time, my name was the controlling negotiator, not Monroe Industrial. And there was more. "They want you," Megan said carefully. "Not just as a negotiator. As a strategic partner." I leaned back in my chair, stunned. "They said you were the only reason the deal ever made sense," she continued. "And frankly, they don't trust Monroe Industrial without you." I closed my eyes. 9 years. 9 years of loyalty, nights slept in airports, holidays spent on conference calls. And now the truth was out in the open. "They never valued the company," I murmured. "They valued control." That afternoon, Robert Monroe requested a private meeting. No lawyers. No Ethan. Just us. We met at a quiet restaurant across town, neutral ground. When Robert walked in, he looked older. Smaller. "Laura," he said softly. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come for you," I replied calmly. "I came for closure." He nodded, eyes downcast. "I built that company from nothing," he said. "I wanted my son to inherit something solid." "You handed him something stable," I replied. "He turned it fragile." Robert sighed deeply. "He feels threatened by you." "That's not my responsibility." "No," he admitted. "It's mine." For a moment, we just sat there. The clink of cutlery from nearby tables filled the silence. "Withdraw the claim," he finally said. "Let us fix this internally." I met his gaze. "You didn't fix it when it mattered." He swallowed. "What do you want?" I slid a single folder across the table. Inside was my counterproposal. Robert's hands trembled slightly as he read. This would remove Ethan from operational control," he said quietly. "Only from deals he's unqualified to manage," I corrected. "Which is most of them." "And you?" he asked. "I walk away with what I earned," I said. "And Monroe Industrial survives." Robert looked up. "And if we refuse?" I didn't raise my voice. "Then Horizon walks. Vendors follow. And your board will vote Ethan out within 6 months." His shoulders slumped. "You've already won," he whispered. I shook my head. "No," I said gently. "I'm just no longer losing." That evening, Ethan called me. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "You humiliated me," he said the moment I picked up. "You fired me in front of my team, I replied. We're even. You planned this, he accused. No, I said calmly. I survived it. Silence. They're choosing you, he said, voice tight. Over me. I paused. No, I corrected. They're choosing competence. The line went dead. 2 hours later, Megan called. They accepted, she said. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. Congratulations, she added. You just forced a billion-dollar company to admit they needed you. I looked out at the city lights glowing against the dark. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel angry. I felt free. The next morning, my name was everywhere. Not publicly, yet, but inside Monroe Industrial, it was impossible to ignore. Every executive inbox had the same subject line waiting when they log in: strategic realignment, effective immediately. I didn't see the email, of course. But I heard about the reactions within minutes. Phones buzzing. Doors closing. Voices dropping to whispers. Because for the first time in the company's 40-year history, control had moved away from the family name. And everyone knew why. I spent that morning at Horizon's downtown office, sitting across from their executive committee. No hostility. No tension. Just quiet respect. You understand, said Daniel Price, Horizon's COO, this changes everything. It should, I replied evenly. Stability doesn't come from titles. It comes from people who know where the cracks are. A few heads nodded. You were the firewall, another executive admitted. We just didn't realize how much damage you were holding back. I didn't correct them. Some truths land harder when people discover them themselves. Back at Monroe Industrial, Ethan was unraveling. By noon, he'd called 3 emergency meetings. 2 were cancelled. 1 ended early. Board members weren't pushing back loudly, but they were no longer backing him either. And that silence. It terrified him. By mid-afternoon, Robert Monroe called me again. Ethan wants to speak to you, he said, his voice strained. Does he? I asked calmly. He's struggling. I paused. I'm not his mentor anymore, I said. And I'm not his shield. Robert hesitated. Just hear him out. I agreed, on one condition. The meeting would be recorded. Ethan arrived late. He looked nothing like the confident executive who'd fired me days earlier. His suit was wrinkled. His jaw tight. He didn't sit right away. You've boxed me in, he said. No, I corrected. You box yourself in when you confuse authority with ability. He scoffed. You think the board trusts you? I know they do, I replied. Because they already did, long before you noticed. He clenched his fists. You could have coached me. I tried, I said quietly. You ignored me. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke again, softer this time. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. I want the company protected from your ego, I said. And you protected from your inexperience. His head snapped up. That's insulting. No, I replied. It's honest. I slid a revised document across the table. This gives you the title you want, I continued. But not the power you're not ready to handle. He stared at the pages. You're demoting me. I'm insulating the company, I corrected. And giving you a chance to grow without burning it down. His voice cracked. You're enjoying this. I shook my head. I'm exhausted. That landed. For the first time, his anger wavered. Outside the boardroom, the company waited. Executives refreshed their inboxes. Assistants whispered. Analysts ran projections. And when the decision finally came true, it was quiet. No announcement. No press release. Just a single internal update. Operational oversight will be transitioned effective immediately. No name mentioned. But everyone knew whose fingerprints were on it. That evening, Megan called. You're officially untouchable, she said. 3 other firms just reached out. I smiled faintly. I'm not looking to conquer anything. No, she agreed. You're choosing. I looked around my apartment, once just a place to sleep, now the birthplace of a complete reversal. For years, I believed loyalty was about endurance. Turns out, it was about knowing when to stop carrying someone else's weight. The first headline dropped at 9:17 a.m. Not about me. Not about Ethan. But about confidence. Horizon Logistics pauses strategic partnership amid internal restructuring at Monroe Industrial. That single sentence sent shockwaves through the market. By 9:30, Monroe Industrial stock dipped 3%. Not catastrophic, but enough to make analysts nervous. Enough to make investors ask questions no one wanted to answer on record. And enough to make silence impossible. I watched the coverage unfold from Horizon's conference room, where I was now listed as an external strategic advisor, a title that carried far more influence than it sounded like it should. They're scrambling, Daniel Price said, scrolling through his tablet. PR is trying to frame this as proactive. It never works, I replied. Markets smell panic. By noon, 3 industry blogs published what the press release didn't say, that Monroe Industrial had lost the one person who understood how to bridge legacy operations with modern expansion. Me. And then, inevitably, my name surfaced. Ethan found out the same way everyone else did. Not through a memo. Through his phone lighting up non-stop. A former colleague texted him, "Is it true Laura's advising Horizon now?" Another message followed, "Board's nervous. They're asking questions." By the time he called me, his voice wasn't angry. It was desperate. "You promised you'd walk away," he said. "I did," I replied calmly. "From Monroe Industrial. You're undermining me." "No," I said. "I'm doing my job. Just not for you anymore." He exhaled sharply. "You're enjoying this." I closed my eyes. "I didn't want it to be public," I said honestly. "But you wanted control without responsibility. This is what that costs." Silence. Then, barely audible, "They don't trust me." I softened my tone. "Trust isn't inherited, Ethan. It's built." He hung up without replying. Inside Monroe Industrial, damage control went into overdrive. The board convened an emergency session, this time without Ethan in the room. Robert Monroe argued for patience. Others argued for survival. And survival was winning. By late afternoon, another update leaked. Monroe Industrial to appoint interim oversight committee for major partnerships. Interim. That word did more damage than any accusation ever could. That evening, my inbox filled with offers. Consulting roles. Advisory seats. Equity partnerships. I declined most of them. Not because they weren't tempting. But because I finally had leverage, and I intended to use it carefully. Megan called, her voice light with disbelief. "You've become a case study," she said. "Business schools are already dissecting this." I laughed softly. "Let them. They're calling it the invisible pillar effect," she added. "Remove the support no one sees, and the structure wobbles." I looked out my window at the city glowing under the evening sky. For years, I'd been invisible on purpose. Reliable. Quiet. Necessary. Now, people notice what happened when I stopped holding everything together. Late that night, I received one final message from Robert Monroe. "You were right. We didn't protect what mattered." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. I protected it for as long as I could. Then I turned my phone face down. Because for the first time, the story wasn't about what they'd done to me. It was about what I chose next. By the end of the week, Monroe Industrial was no longer pretending. The board's silence had turned into action. And action, once it starts, doesn't ask for permission. I found out early Friday morning when Megan forwarded me a confidential agenda, one that wasn't meant to leave the boardroom. Vote on executive leadership confidence. Ethan's name was the only one listed. No alternatives. No soft language. Just a question that would decide everything. Do they have the numbers? I asked. Megan didn't hesitate. Yes. I closed my laptop slowly. For a moment, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Just wait. Because no matter how justified it was, watching someone lose the thing they believed was theirs still carried consequences. Ethan called me one last time before the vote. Not angry. Not desperate. Just tired. "I never meant to push you out," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to live in your shadow." I leaned back in my chair. "I was never your shadow," I replied. "I was your safety net." A long pause. "They're going to remove me," he said. "Yes," I answered honestly. "And you let it happen." "No," I corrected gently. "You built it." His voice cracked. "What am I supposed to do now?" That question landed differently. Because for the first time, he wasn't speaking as a CEO. He was speaking as someone who had been handed power before he understood responsibility. "Learn," I said. "The way everyone else has to." He didn't respond. But he didn't argue either. The vote happened at noon. By 12:14 p.m., it was over. Ethan Monroe was stripped of operational authority. The board issued a carefully worded internal notice, praising his vision while quietly removing every level of real control. Robert Monroe stepped down as chairman the same day. Not forced. But finished. The markets reacted immediately. Stock stabilized. Vendors resumed talks. And Horizon Logistics. They finalized their partnership on new terms. Terms that no longer included Monroe Industrial as the lead decision-maker. Instead, a new entity was introduced. A neutral strategic firm. One with a familiar advisor. Me. That afternoon, I walked into Monroe Industrial's headquarters for the first time since my firing. No escort. No badge restrictions. People stopped talking when I passed, not out of fear, but recognition. They knew what had happened. And why. In the boardroom, the interim committee stood when I entered. Not formally. Instinctively. "We'd like to make you an offer," the acting chair said. I listened. Consulting authority. Oversight role. long-term incentives. Power, without ownership. I shook my head. I'm not here to reclaim a seat, I said calmly. I'm here to close a chapter. They exchanged glances. What would it take for you to stay? Someone asked. I smiled faintly. Nothing, I replied. Because staying was never the goal. That evening, I met Megan for dinner. To walking away, she said, raising her glass. To choosing, I corrected. She smiled. You realize this ends with you starting your own firm, right? I laughed. Maybe. But the idea stuck. Not out of ambition. Out of alignment. Later that night, a final email came in, from Ethan. I see it now. I wish I'd listened. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied with a single line. So do I. Because the truth was simple. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about consequences. And the quiet power of knowing when to let something fall, so something better can rise. 6 months later, Monroe Industrial was still standing. But it wasn't the same company. The family name remained on the building, but the culture had shifted. Decisions were slower. More deliberate. Less about ego, more about evidence. And I wasn't part of it. That was the point. I was sitting in a glass-walled office overlooking the river when Megan walked in, grinning like she'd been holding a secret too long. They approved it, she said. I didn't need to ask what it was. The firm had taken shape quietly over the past few months, no press, no grand announcements. Just relationships built on trust and reputation. Ardent Strategy Group. My firm. Designed for companies that didn't need saving, just honesty. You ready? Megan asked. I looked around the office. Minimal. Clean. Intentional. Yes, I said. I've been ready for years. Our first official client. Horizon Logistics. But they weren't the real test. The real test came 3 weeks later, when a mid-sized manufacturing company walked in with a familiar story. Founder stepping back. Child stepping up. Quiet chaos behind closed doors. They wanted advice. I smiled. Let's talk about governance, I said. One afternoon, I ran into Ethan by accident. A coffee shop near the old Monroe Industrial Building. He looked different. Less polished. More grounded. We stood there awkwardly for a moment before he spoke. I heard about your firm, he said. Congratulations, I replied. And meant it. He nodded. I'm starting over. Consulting. Smaller scale. That's smart. He hesitated. You were never trying to take my place, were you? I met his eyes. No, I said gently. I was trying to make sure the place didn't collapse. He exhaled, something easing in his shoulders. I know that now. We parted without bitterness. Without victory. Just clarity. That evening, I received an email from Robert Monroe. Short. Simple. The company is healthier. Thank you for protecting it when we couldn't. I didn't reply. Some acknowledgements don't need answers. As Ardent Strategy Group grew, so did the pattern. Companies didn't call me when everything was broken. They called when something essential was being ignored. And every time, I remembered the lesson that started it all. Being indispensable isn't about power. It's about responsibility. And responsibility, once taken seriously, changes everything. On the wall of my office, there's no diploma. No awards. Just one framed sentence. Stability isn't inherited. It's built. Because the truth is, I didn't win by taking anything from anyone. I won by stepping away. By letting people see the difference between control and competence. Between loyalty and self-erasure. Sometimes, the strongest move isn't staying and fighting. It's knowing your value, and choosing where to apply it.